Have you ever felt completely lost in a foreign country, surrounded by history you couldn't understand, only to have that moment transform into one of your greatest adventures? Imagine standing before the actual Star-Spangled Banner, the very flag that inspired America's national anthem, and able to fully express the awe you feel because the right English words just won't come to you. That's exactly where our story begins today. Hello, English learners. Welcome to Story-Driven English, where we don't just teach language, we immerse you in it through captivating stories that make vocabulary stick and comprehension click. Today's story will take you on a journey through the halls of the National Museum of American History, where history comes alive and English learning happens naturally. You'll pick up museum-related vocabulary, cultural insights, and everyday expressions that you can start using immediately. But before we dive in, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and notification bell right now. Why? Because unlike traditional English lessons, our story-based approach makes learning feel less like work and more like entertainment, and you don't want to miss a single episode. Our community of story-driven English learners is growing every day, with members reporting breakthrough moments in their comprehension and speaking confidence after just a few videos. So, are you ready to improve your English while exploring American history through the eyes of a young international student? Let's begin this immersive language journey together. A day at the American History Museum. It was a bright Tuesday morning when Sarah stepped off the metro at the Smithsonian Station in Washington, D.C. She stretched her arms wide and took a deep breath of the fresh spring air. This was going to be a special day, her first visit to the National Museum of American History. As a 23-year-old international student from Vietnam, Sarah had been in America for only 6 months, but she was determined to learn everything she could about her host country's history and culture. Sarah had planned this trip meticulously. Her backpack contained a small notebook, her camera, a water bottle, and a sandwich wrapped in paper. She had read online that museums could be exhausting, so she came prepared. With a smile on her face and excitement bubbling in her chest, she joined the stream of tourists heading toward the impressive building with its modern glass entrance. The museum stood tall and dignified on the National Mall, surrounded by well-maintained gardens and pathways. Its architecture was a blend of classic and modern design, with a grand facade that seemed to welcome visitors from all over the world. As Sarah approached the entrance, she noticed families, school groups, and individual visitors like herself, all eager to explore the treasures inside. "Ticket, please," said a friendly museum attendant at the entrance. Sarah was pleasantly surprised to learn that admission was free. "The Smithsonian Museums are free for everyone," the attendant explained. With a warm smile, "It's America's gift to those who want to learn." Once inside, Sarah stood in the grand lobby, momentarily overwhelmed by the vastness of the space and the multitude of exhibition halls spreading out in all directions. A large American flag hung prominently in the center atrium, and beneath it, visitors were taking photos and pointing excitedly at the displays. Sarah consulted the museum map she had picked up at the information desk. There were 3 floors filled with exhibitions covering everything from transportation and technology to entertainment, social history, and political developments. She decided to start with the most iconic exhibit, the Star-Spangled Banner. As she entered the dimly lit gallery housing the enormous flag that had inspired the national anthem, Sarah felt a sense of reverence. The flag was displayed horizontally in a special case designed to preserve its fragile fabric. It was much larger than she had imagined, and some parts were missing, giving it a distinctive, jagged appearance. A museum docent was explaining the history of the flag to a small group nearby. This flag flew over Fort McHenry during the War of 1812, the elderly gentleman said with evident pride. Francis Scott Key saw it still waving after a night of British bombardment, and he was so moved that he wrote the Star-Spangled Banner. The flag was made by Mary Pickersgill and her daughter. It originally measured 30 by 40 feet, with 15 stars and 15 stripes. Sarah lingered in the gallery, absorbing the significance of this treasured artifact. She snapped a few photos and made some notes about the flag's dimensions and history. In her notebook, she was so absorbed in her observations that she almost bumped into a tall man wearing a baseball cap when she turned to leave. "Oh, I'm sorry," she exclaimed, stepping back. "No harm done," he replied with a friendly nod. "First time here?" Sarah nodded, feeling a little shy about her accented English. "Me too," he said. "I've lived in D.C. for 20 years, but never made it inside until today. Kind of embarrassing, right?" He laughed, and Sarah smiled, feeling more at ease. They parted ways, and Sarah continued to the American Presidency exhibition. She was fascinated by the collection of personal items that had belonged to various presidents: Abraham Lincoln's top hat, Franklin D. Roosevelt's leg braces, and Thomas Jefferson's desk. Each artifact told a story, making these historical figures seem more human and relatable. By midday, Sarah's feet were beginning to ache, but her enthusiasm remained undiminished. She found a quiet corner in the museum's cafeteria to eat her sandwich and review her notes and photos. The cafeteria buzzed with conversations in multiple languages as visitors from around the world shared their experiences and impressions. With renewed energy after her break, Sarah headed to the transportation exhibition. The sight of an actual steam locomotive inside the museum made her gasp with surprise. It was enormous, its black iron body gleaming under the spotlights. Nearby was an old Ford Model T, looking quaint and toy-like compared to modern cars. They drove that thing on real roads? Sarah murmured to herself, trying to imagine what it must have been like to travel in such a vehicle before smooth highways and traffic signals existed. As she wandered through the transportation gallery, Sarah noticed a small girl, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, who seemed separated from her family. The child was standing alone, looking increasingly distressed. As she glanced around the crowded space, Sarah approached her carefully. "Hello there. Are you looking for someone?" she asked. Gently, the little girl nodded, her lower lip trembling. "I can't find my mommy and daddy," she said, her voice barely audible. "Don't worry, we'll find them," Sarah reassured her. "My name is Sarah. What's yours?" "Emma," the child replied, seeming slightly comforted by Sarah's friendly manner. Sarah took Emma's hand and led her to the nearest museum staff member, who promptly used the radio to alert security. Within minutes, Emma's parents arrived, breathless and relieved. "Thank you so much for helping our daughter," Emma's mother said gravely. "We turned around for just a moment, and she was gone." "It was no problem," Sarah replied, smiling at Emma, who was now safely back with her family. "The museum is so big and crowded, This small incident warmed Sarah's heart and added a special touch to her museum experience. It reminded her that beyond the artifacts and exhibitions, museums were places where human connections happen every day. The afternoon flew by as Sarah explored more of the museum's treasures. She was particularly enchanted by the First Lady's exhibition, which displayed inaugural gowns worn by presidents' wives throughout history. The dresses told a story of changing fashion and social expectations, from Martha Washington's modest attire to Michelle Obama's elegant modern designs. In the American Innovation Gallery, Sarah learned about inventions that had transformed daily life, from the telegraph and telephone to personal computers and smartphones. She spent a long time watching a video about the early days of the internet, amazed at how rapidly technology had evolved in just a few decades. As closing time approached, Sarah realized she had only seen a fraction of what the museum had to offer. She hurried to the gift shop to buy some postcards and a small replica of the Star-Spangled Banner as souvenirs. While browsing, she spotted the man in the baseball cap whom she had bumped into earlier. "Did you enjoy your visit?" he asked, recognizing her. "Very much," Sarah replied, "but I couldn't see everything." "The museum is too big for one day. That's the beauty of these Smithsonian museums," he said. "They're free, so you can come back as many times as you want. I'm definitely returning next weekend to see what I missed." Sarah nodded in agreement. "I will come back too. There's so much more to learn." Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the National Mall. Tourists were still streaming in and out of the various museums that lined the grassy esplanade. Sarah sat on a bench facing the Washington Monument and opened her notebook to organize her thoughts. The museum had given her more than just historical facts. It had provided insights into the American character and values. She had seen how Americans celebrated their ingenuity through the Innovation Gallery, honored their leaders in the Presidency exhibition, and preserved their cultural heritage in countless carefully curated displays. As an international student, Sarah had sometimes felt disconnected from American society, but the museum had helped bridge that gap. She now understood certain references her American classmates made and felt more confident joining their conversations about U.S. history and culture. Before leaving, Sarah decided to visit one more exhibition, the recently updated Many Voices, One Nation Gallery. This multimedia presentation explored how diverse peoples and cultures had shaped American identity over centuries. She watched as images of Native Americans, European colonists, African slaves, Asian immigrants, and Latino communities flickered across screens, each group contributing to the complex tapestry of American society. In this exhibition, Sarah found echoes of her own experience as a newcomer to America. A quote on the wall particularly resonated with her: "The story of America is the story of its people, their struggles, their achievements, their dreams." She took a photo of these words to remember them. The museum announced its imminent closing through the public address system, and visitors began reluctantly making their way toward the exits. Sarah joined the flow, her mind still processing everything she had seen and learned. Outside, the city was transitioning from day to evening. Government workers were heading home, street vendors were packing up, and restaurants were filling with dinner guests. Sarah decided to walk for a while along the mall before catching the metro back to her apartment. As she strolled, she reflected on how museums preserved not just objects but stories. Behind each artifact in the American History Museum was a human narrative, someone who had created, used, or been affected by that item. These stories connected people across time and space, helping visitors like Sarah understand the broader context of American history. She thought about how she would describe her experience to her family back in Vietnam. They would be fascinated by the enormous flag, the presidential artifacts, and the vintage cars and trains. She would tell them about helping little Emma find her parents and about the friendly man in the baseball cap who, like her, was exploring his nation's history. Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out the replica of the Star-Spangled Banner she had bought. It was small enough to fit in her palm, but it represented something immense: a nation's journey through time, with all its triumphs and challenges, its mistakes and corrections, its constant evolution. The next morning, Sarah woke up early. Inspired by her museum visit, she opened her laptop and began typing a blog post about her experience, hoping to encourage other international students to explore America's museums. She described the artifacts that had impressed her most, shared anecdotes about her encounters with other visitors, and reflected on what she had learned about American history and values. As she wrote, Sarah realized that the museum had given her more than just knowledge. It had sparked her curiosity and opened new pathways for learning. She found herself researching topics that had intrigued her during her visit: the War of 1812, the evolution of transportation in America, the changing role of first ladies, and the development of consumer technology. She also noticed that her English vocabulary had expanded through her museum experience. Words like artifact, exhibition, preservation, and heritage now felt familiar and useful. The informative plaques and audio guides had introduced her to historical terms and concepts in a context that made them easy to understand and remember. Sarah decided that museums would become a regular part of her American education. There were still many Smithsonian institutions to explore: the Air and Space Museum, the Natural History Museum, the Portrait Gallery, and others. Each would offer a different perspective on America and its place in the world. Later that week, Sarah met with her language exchange partner, Michael, an American student who was learning Vietnamese. They usually alternated between speaking English and Vietnamese during their meetings, helping each other practice conversation skills. "So, what have you been up to this week?" Michael asked in careful Vietnamese. Sarah switched to English to describe her museum visit. "I spent a whole day at the American History Museum, and it was wonderful. I learned so much about this country, things I would never find in textbooks." "That's cool," Michael replied. "What was your favorite part?" Sarah thought for a moment. "It's hard to choose, but I think the Star-Spangled Banner exhibit was special. There is something powerful about seeing the actual flag that inspired your national anthem." As they continued their conversation, Sarah found herself using expressions and historical references she had picked up at the museum. Michael noticed the change. "Your English is getting more natural," he commented. "And you seem to know more about American history than I do now." Sarah laughed. "Well, I was paying attention during my museum visit." "Maybe you should go too." They agreed to visit another Smithsonian museum together the following month, turning their language exchange into a cultural exploration. That evening, as Sarah reviewed her photos from the museum, she came across the image of the quote that had moved The story of America is the story of its people. She decided to use this as the title for her YouTube video about the museum visit. Over the weekend, Sarah began working on her video project. She organized her photos, wrote a script that incorporated what she had learned, and recorded herself narrating her museum experience in English. She was nervous about her pronunciation and grammar, but she reminded herself that the video was meant to help other English learners like herself. The editing process took longer than she expected. She wanted to include information about each major exhibit, share her personal reflections, and highlight vocabulary that might be useful for English learners. She added subtitles in both English and Vietnamese to make the content more accessible. A month after her visit to the National Museum of American History, Sarah uploaded her completed video to YouTube with the title Learn English Through My American Museum Adventure. She shared the link with her language exchange partners, international student friends, and family back home. The response was encouraging. Other international students commented that the video had inspired them to visit museums as part of their language learning journey. Some viewers asked questions about specific exhibits, which Sarah answered, creating a small community of historically curious English learners. Sarah's American History Museum adventure had come full circle from being a visitor absorbing knowledge to becoming a guide sharing what she had learned with others. The museum experience had enriched her understanding of America, improved her English skills, and given her a new way to connect with people from around the world. And it had all started with a simple decision to step off the metro at the Smithsonian Station on a bright Tuesday morning, ready to explore and learn. Key vocabulary repeated throughout museum: a building where objects of historical, scientific, or artistic interest are displayed. Exhibition, exhibit, a public display of works of art or items of interest. Or ticked, an object made by humans, typically of historical or cultural interest. Gallery, a room or building for the display or sale of works of art. Docent, a person who leads guided tour, especially through a museum heritage, features belonging to the culture of a particular society, such as traditions, languages, or buildings that were created in the past and still have historical importance. Preservation, the act of maintaining something in its original state or in good condition. Display, an arrangement of objects intended to be looked at. Collection, a group of objects or works to be seen, studied, or kept together. History, the study of past events, particularly in human affairs. National Mall, along Open Park in downtown Washington, D.C., home to many monuments and museums. Smithsonian, a group of museums and research centers administered by the U.S. government. Culture, the customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social group. Innovation, a new method, idea, product, etc. Souvenir, a thing that is kept as a reminder of a person, place, or event. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the National Museum of American History. I hope this story has not only improved your English skills, but also sparked your curiosity about American history and culture. Learning a language becomes so much more engaging when it's connected to real experiences and stories. That's what we aim to provide here at Story Driven English, a fun, immersive way to enhance your English through meaningful narratives. Did you enjoy today's story? Did you learn new vocabulary or expressions? I'd love to hear about your own. museum experiences, or which part of this story resonated with you the most. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and share it with friends who are also on their English learning journey. Your support helps our community grow. Don't forget to leave a comment below with any questions about the vocabulary we covered or suggestions for future story topics. I read every comment and use your feedback to create better content. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you won't miss our weekly stories designed to make English learning a delightful adventure rather than a tedious task. Remember, at Story Driven English, we believe that every story opens a new door to language mastery. Until our next story adventure, keep reading, keep listening, and keep speaking English. See you next time.